Um, Figure 8.1 is another interesting figure that I would like you to have a sense of for this reason. There are direct and indirect pathways to negative mental health that occurs in neighborhoods. So if you look at the figure 8-1, page 172, it starts to give you some indication of these direct and indirect pathways. So for instance, what might be some of the characteristics of the places where we live that impact mental health? Places where we live. What are some of the things that might impact mental health based on the places we live?
Crime issue.
Huh?
Crime.
Okay, interesting. Let's think about crime. If you take an area, I think crime is what I'm going to do here. One of the bigger issues to sort of take away from this chapter 8 is this whole idea of direct and indirect pathways, right? So neighborhoods. How do neighborhoods impact people's mental health? And we can talk about individual, or we can talk neighborhood. These are indirect. Crime. If I live in a neighborhood that has a high crime rate, right? If I have a neighborhood with a high crime rate, does that necessarily impact me directly?
No.
Why not?
Because I think you don't have to necessarily be the victim of a crime.
Very nice. You don't have, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, because if you know you're in a bad neighborhood, per se, then it's kind of a paranoia when you get home. If you get home late, the streets may not be lit well, so it's that constant fear.
That's interesting, because there you tapped into sort of both, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the thing to think about. Think about something like crime. If a neighborhood has a crime rate, this happens at the level of the neighborhood, right? So we could look at neighborhoods, zip codes, all throughout San Antonio, and we could gauge the crime rate. And specifically, let's worry about violent crimes, right? Episodes of violent crime. How many crimes over the last year per 100,000 people occurred? How many violent crimes per 100,000 occurred in 2015? Okay, fine. And some neighborhoods are going to be higher than others. So in the Dominion, I'm rather confident that the aggregate crime rate, violent crime rate in the Dominion is lower than it might be in other parts of San Antonio. But what if I've never experienced the crime myself, right? So having experienced the crime, being victimized is at an individual level. Okay? So if I'm the victim of a violent crime, let's say that I am burglarized and I am physically assaulted and hit, and I'm talking hit hard, where it physically disables me. I have to go to a doctor, I have to seek treatment, I have to go to get medical treatment because I'm burglarized but also victimized violently. That isn't direct. That's going to have a direct impact on my mental health functioning. How so? How so?
I mean, depending on the type of person that, assaulted you, if you get to look at them, then that could lead you to stereotyping.
So what would happen? How would I live my life now that I've been?
Everyone that looks similar to the person that assaulted you, that could trigger some sort of trauma.
Stress, anxiety.
Stress, anxiety. We might become sort of paranoid.
Yeah.
Fear.
Right? Sort of irrational fears of, and hey, why not? We might have irrational fears of certain groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's right or wrong, those might be reactions to being victimized directly, right? because we have experienced a direct pathway. So we live in a high crime neighborhood, probability of experiencing crime is higher, and I do experience that crime. That's going to directly influence my mental health functioning. But what if I'm not victimized? What if I'm not victimized, but I still live in that high crime rate, that neighborhood that is characterized by high crime rates? If I'm not personally victimized in a direct pathway, how does the indirect pathway of a high crime neighborhood impact
You
you?
may have relationships with people who
Have been
had victimized,
That's interesting.
so this may produce indirect effects.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, growing up in South Africa, crime rates were high everywhere, like even in
Interesting.
the nicer neighborhoods. And I guess I was still young at the time, but you kind of grow up more cautious and maybe more, I don't know, it's kind of hard to say because I don't think I felt any like stress because of it. Definitely fear sometimes you knew what to stay away from, because I mean, crime, it touched like anyone around us. It was, our neighbors have gotten broken into, like, girl got raped in our house on the same street as me, with her parents still in the house, like, that kind of stuff. It happened around us all the time. But I guess I wasn't an adult at the time, so maybe my parents experienced that differently, and they maybe had like anxiety because of it, because they have kids growing up,
For sure.
in that. So that's kind of interesting to me to be like indirectly, but knowing people who have been affected in my neighborhoods and stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of-
So Harriet grew up much of her life in South Africa. Harriet was just talking. And Harriet, say hi, Harriet. Oh, everybody's in love. Oh, I want her number. Ah! Settle down, you bastards. Having experienced a very high crime, really a high crime society. I mean, I don't know what it's like now in South Africa.
Because there's not necessarily specific pockets that are.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yes, but the crime is high everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that, again, I don't know what it's like now, but back in the day, South Africa was characterized by very high crime rates as a country, right? As a country, it was characterized by high crime rates. That's not to say the United States isn't, because for an industrialized, right, modern, right, Western democracy, we have like the high, not the highest, but we have exceedingly high crime rates in the United States. But we have these pockets, right? We have these pockets which bring up our entire, and again, goes back to this whole notion of this book of the unequal society. But in South Africa, where crime is very high all over, yeah, we might see where even when I don't personally experience crime, knowing that people around me have experienced crime, might develop certain anxieties, might develop certain paranoias, and frankly, it might also affect our functioning in terms of social interactions with other people, right? We may be less inclined to participate sort of in neighborhood community events, which are positive reinforcers of better mental health functioning. In other words, my friends, people may just be unhappy, generally unhappy in these circumstances where they're surrounded by crime. Not because I'm experiencing it myself, because there's always that possibility I may experience it, knowing that it exists at a high rate all around me. So thinking about these indirect and direct effects of neighborhood is an important issue when thinking about overall psychological distress. Okay, let me ask you for another one. Another example. Talk to me about two things. Cleanliness. Neighborhood cleanliness, right? So how would neighborhood cleanliness work at both the individual direct and at the neighborhood indirect? Mike?
If your neighborhood is dirty and unclean and like vandalized, not taken care of, then people have the perception that there's more crime in that area than somewhere that's really clean and taken care of.
That's
The
true.
broken glass theory.
I was about
Yeah.
to say, the
Yeah.
broken
Broken
window.
windows.
Broken window, the broken window thing. Rudolph, a mayor that applied that theory, the idea was, you don't have to know this on a test, settle down. Somebody just brought up the idea of the broken window theory, which is that in a neighborhood, whenever you start to see decay, fix it right away, right? So if you see a broken window, fix that window right away. Because if you let that window stay broken, somebody's gonna break another window. And then it just, bad neighborhoods spiral out of control. That was the mayor that applied that, whether you like him or not, was Rudolph Giuliani, right? Giuliani applied the sort of broken window theory to the way that he managed New York City. And whether you love him or hate him, I mean, you can hate him all you want.
Start with Times Square.
Oh my goodness, you know, I mean,
In the
I went to
80s,
New York,
Times Square was-
I went to New York all the time, and Grand Central Station was a slum, right? And by the time Giuliani got out of office, Grand Central Station was like a freaking strip mall, right? Now,
World now.
what nobody understood or what happened were, you know, what did Giuliani do with all the homeless people? Where did they go, right? Well, they went somewhere, and they didn't go to public housing because there was no more of that. So they were scattered all over the city. That's a separate argument altogether. So if we think about something like neighborhood cleanliness, here's what I want you to think about. Thinking again about these direct and indirect effects. If I live in a neighborhood that is polluted, that is dirty, broken glass, broken windows, pollution, can I, at the individual level, mitigate against that? And how would I do that? Can I mitigate against that? At the individual level. So,
Like trying to keep your own lawn clean. You know,
how about I keep my own place clean, right? So how about I keep my apartment in a very, you know, dirty, you know, polluted, graffiti-ridden neighborhood? How about I keep my place clean, right? My own personal space, I keep it clean.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it happens all the time, right? You can go into some of the poorest parts of the United States where you walk into people's apartments and they're spotless. So maybe the children growing up, right, are not experiencing the indirect effects of neighborhood cleanliness because their homes are maintained, they're impeccable. Mom, dad, whoever's there maintains an impeccable household. But how far does that get you? How far does that get you? In terms of the indirect effect of that cleanliness.
Well, I mean, you could argue that it kind of carries a positive indirect effect. I mean, if you're seeing, I mean, this is talking about like on the outside of, say, a home, kind of, because I saw this on the east side when I was doing surveys last year. It's just, yeah, you had some houses that were really well maintained, and then right next door it could be kind of a decaying, you know, getting broken glass, yard hasn't been cut in forever. So you could possibly argue that the indirect effect is if one of your neighbors sees that you have a clean house, it might motivate them to copy that.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I don't know how much evidence there is about that. I
Yeah.
really don't. I know that like people in public policy are all over that stuff. The big thing in public policy is there a way to revitalize really poor communities? Is there, how do we revitalize, you know, poor disadvantaged communities? What's the pathway to make that happen?
So I
Is it
How do
like,
you make them care about maintaining that? Because a lot of times people would argue that that's not what they're going to put their money into because they have so, like, their resources are so few that they don't care about what their lawn or the outside of the house or anything. Inside maybe a different story, but like the upkeep, that's not a priority financially to
The
them.
time
You
and
know?
money. Well, and then that's,
And that, yeah, the whole neighborhood's value is based off on that.
Is there a term for it called like?
we're gonna get there.
Gentrification.
Okay, but so the point that was brought up now is this idea of gentrification.
They used to call it urban renewal now.
Gentrification, but see, that's the point. I think this ties into the themes of this book.
yeah.
Unwell, unequal societies. We really don't do a very good job of revitalizing poor communities and keeping poor people there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
It drives the
Right?
poverty.
we don't seem to do a very good, well, I would like to think that we do. In a society that is well, and a society that is just, we would find a way to revitalize poor communities while